Joining us now is Sky News Washington correspondent Annelise Nielsen. Annelise, I want to get to North Carolina and the situation with the floods in a moment. But first, I want to talk about that big vice presidential debate. VP debates are never that big a deal, except this year seems a bit different, and the polling seems to be calling the debate a draw. I thought Vance won, but Annelise, what was your reaction? Who won, who lost?
I mean, look, I was watching with a bunch of Republican supporters and it gave them a lot to be excited about. That's a win. But broadly speaking, certainly on the debate strategy, on the performance on stage, JD Vance was the clear winner. But the question in an election campaign is, does it change any votes? What it did do was take away one of the big weaknesses of the Trump campaign. There's been so much criticism around JD Vance as a pick that he's such a rabid anti-supporter from years gone by and has now done a complete 180. The commentary that he's done on childless cat ladies being miserable and making everyone else in the world miserable has been particularly toxic among women. But I thought that was the really critical part of this debate that hasn't been covered that extensively. And that was the change in rhetoric from JD Vance on this particular point. And when he said, we have to earn trust back for how this debate has gone, that is something I think is going to give a lot of people on the ground doing that real door-to-door pressing the flesh kind of campaigning something to say when the Republicans haven't had a good message to say. And I think that's going to be something that really turns things around. And it was a bad night for Walz. He's the personal pick of Kamala Harris. She's claimed him as her pick, that she was listening to her gut and it was a completely instinctive reaction. And just this story about him lying about being in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square, the substance of it, I mean, I don't think it would change many minds, but it's helped build this narrative about him lying about a lot of his story.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Hong Kong story seems to be really interesting to me because, as I said at the top of the show, it's not just Hong Kong, it's at Tiananmen Square, but it's also, you know, the whole business about what rank he left the National Guard with, whether or not he actually went to Iraq or Afghanistan during the Gulf War. Does Walz, for all of his sort of good-humored folksiness, kind of have this problem of, well, let's just say not lying necessarily, but kind of never letting the truth get in the way of a good story?
And look, I mean, if we look at Donald Trump, we know he's prone to a bit of hyperbole as well, and he loves to exaggerate things, but he does it with a certain sense of humor. And people do find it, especially those who already like him. Trust me, I'm not pretending like there's not half the country that loathes Donald Trump, but they find it funny. He's funny to say, oh, yeah, I'm the greatest of all time, and everyone's saying I'm the greatest of all time. With Walz, it just seems like he's not keeping track. And it seems like, especially on that campaign, on that debate stage, he didn't have that debate experience. He couldn't argue the points, and it looked like he was kind of short-circuiting the moment that JD Vance agreed with him because he wasn't expecting it. And that's a great strategy from someone who's an experienced debater, experienced lawyer like Vance. And it just showed him getting outplayed. And so it doesn't bode well for kind of people trusting him to be an ordinary guy who's risen to this extraordinary office. Great. It's great to have ordinary people reach the echelons of society by ability. And so the thing they're going to have to convince people is that he's there because he's the best guy for the job, not just to tick a box.
Annelise, have the Democrats made a real big mistake here insofar as, you know, they picked Tim Walz? There's a lot of talk about why they didn't pick Governor Shapiro from Pennsylvania. But putting that aside, he's only done one real interview, and that was the sort of thing that he co-piloted with Kamala Harris. He's got virtually no national media experience. Then to throw him out there to the wolves on the big stage of a national debate, I mean, what else were the Democrats expecting but some sort of, you know, not a meltdown necessarily, but just a performance of an unseasoned debater and media performer?
And James, the CNN hosts were saying exactly that too. They were saying that he's avoided media, Kamala Harris avoids media, so they're not match ready when they need to be in a combative environment. That's important when you're talking about the people who are going to be representing America around the world. And this is the problem where their strategy is not working. As a member of the press, I'm always going to be arguing for people to do more, to be out there, to be accountable. But it's also where they hone their messaging, and that's not been happening. The other thing that I found really interesting being at this watch party in North Carolina was that there was a discussion among the people there. They were joking about how they put their Trump Vance signs out on lawns and that people steal them. And then they were joking about how, oh, it was really bad in 2020. Actually, it hasn't been that bad this time around. And it really stuck in my mind because it really kind of resonates with what I'm seeing, where there's not that kind of really high tension perception around America, that there was just such heightened emotions around the 2020 election. And we're not seeing that against Donald Trump this time. So that bodes well for talking about enthusiasm for voters getting out and not being bullied out of voting for Trump as well.